Quite some time since our next guest has joined us on set to break down the national and international headlines, and that means we'll have plenty to discuss. And of course, one of those stories is the subject taking over every newspaper front page and headline on every news broadcast. The situation in Egypt. Citizens of Egypt are taking to the streets demanding the ousting of current President Hosni Mubarak, and there are no signs of backing down. Here with us to break down the story and more is political analyst and attorney and professor, SUNY Maritime attorney Mark Meirowitz. How are you?
I teach at SUNY Maritime.
Right,
I'm not an attorney there.
You're a practicing attorney.
I am a practicing attorney. Hi, David. How are you? Before we begin today,
yes,
on a more local front,
okay,
I wanted to mention that I think Punxsutawney Phil, I think, did not see his shadow today, so therefore we're going to actually have an end to this terrible weather.
We will.
Yes, we will. So that's a good, and also the Staten Island Chuck, the mayor announced also, same result. So hopefully we'll have an end to this weather. That's the domestic report. Now to go to Egypt for a moment. The situation in Egypt is extremely chaotic, and it's very hard to understand what is really going on, because what's happening at the present time is the anti-Mubarak forces that have been solely on the streets on their own now are clashing with the pro-Mubarak forces. Mubarak has announced that he's going to step down at some time, but not right now. The army has asked the people to be calm and go back to work. The internet that was shut down has been restored. The situation is completely confusing, and even the reporters from all of the national, international news organizations haven't the slightest idea what is going on. I heard a report this morning, for example, on NPR, and the reporter said, "I'm standing here and I see people clashing." No idea. And this is also indicative of America's failing policy on this, and Obama's policy on this, which I believe has been very, very ill-advised.
I would say it's been 30 years in the making, this policy. We've really given him a pass for a long period of time and kind of looked the other way. Does it look like the entire region is starting to get fed up with their leaders?
Well, I wanted to comment on your point about looking the other way. The situation in the Middle East is extremely confusing, and especially the fact that there have been a number of wars fought there. So American foreign policy has tried to stabilize the region and to find a peaceful solution to all of the conflicts that exist there. There's been a peace agreement between Egypt and Israel now for many, many years. It hasn't been a good peace. It hasn't been a warm peace. It's been a very cold peace, but it's a peace, notwithstanding that, and there hasn't been a war of the same dimensions that we've had. Tremendous conflicts with Gaza and Lebanon, and with Hamas, with Hezbollah, but not with Egypt. Egypt's border has been a quiet border. The whole situation in the Middle East and internationally changed completely with this situation. It's interesting to note that our foreign policy analysts seem to have no idea about this, or maybe have no contingency plan. When you say 30 years in the making, the problem is that the Muslim Brotherhood, which is a very powerful opposition force, which has announced, in fact, now that when power is taken over, there's going to be another war with Israel. So we see now the same kinds of ominous trends that we saw in Iran in the turnover from the Shah to the Ayatollah Khomeini.
But certainly in the last two administrations, they've expressed their concerns to Mubarak, that they've wanted him to take some of the aid that we've been giving Egypt and put it into the infrastructure and help out the people, and he obviously has not done that. Do you think he's going to make it to September, or does it look like his time is limited?
Well, he's announced that he's not going to stand for re-election. He's announced that he's going to step down. On the other hand, his pro-forces are in the streets fighting with the anti-forces. So, this is the Middle East, and this is a very hard area to understand, and not everything proceeds in a rational and in a straight-line manner. It's hard to know. But right now, the repercussions are very clear in respect to Iran, and we should not forget to mention that Egypt sits in a region with Iran, with Turkey, with Israel. And what has happened is, if Egypt falls to the Muslim Brotherhood, which is very likely, even if al-Baradei comes in, al-Baradei is, at least at most, is going to be a transitional person. And what I wanted to say was that the result of that will be that Israel will be, for the first time since the previous Middle East wars, completely encircled by enemies. It will have Hamas in Gaza. Hamas, by the way, which was predicted to lose the popular election, the Muslim Brotherhood is predicted to lose the popular election. It doesn't happen like that. Lebanon will have Hezbollah. Egypt will be an enemy. And all these regional actors will surround Israel with the inevitability of another conflict, which is disastrous.
Which leads me to Jordan. Do you think Jordan is another one of the countries that seems to be on the precipice of actually falling in terms of falling to the people? Or does it look like the king has has a strong position there?
Well, we thought that Mubarak had a strong position. He's a strong dictator. It started in Tunisia. It spread through the Arab world. It shows a paradigm that people can go to the streets and can overturn dictators. Now, this may seem, as you say, from the American point of view, simplistically, let's support democracy. Obama's first response was, let's get them Facebook, let them use social networking, let's use the internet. American foreign policy is of course promoting democracy in the world, but also to promote stability in the world, so that the world does not have another conflagration, another war, especially a war now with an emboldened and empowered Iran, which is about to go nuclear, and a war in the Middle East. We're talking about a world consequence, huge proportions of disaster. And I can assure you that all of the policymakers around the world are in tremendous shock and crisis about this development. And as you say correctly about Jordan, Jordan might have a strong leader, but so did Egypt, and so did Tunisia. Doesn't mean anything.
Let's talk about the United States in our interest. Let's go back to 1979, and we're talking about Iran, and we're obviously, and we're on the wrong side here. We're on the side of the Shah. It's not working out. They throw him out, and look what the Ayatollah ends up coming in. Does that look like that could happen here when we're talking about Egypt? Should we be taking a stronger stance, to push Mubarak out now, so maybe whoever comes in might be able to,
There's no question that America, you're absolutely right. We want to be on the sort of the right, on the cusp of we want to be on the right side of the story and be able to promote democracy and say we promote democracy. Very nice point. But on the other hand, we have to be worried about the consequences of an Iranian-type development. And that's why the United States is evacuating all its people from Egypt, because we don't want to end up with another hostage situation. And by the way, when you say wrong side and right side about the Shah of Iran, I'm not a defender of the Shah of Iran.
Right.
But on the other hand, when we look at it from sometimes we can look at it from the people level, but we can also look at it from the foreign policy level. And American foreign policy's intention is to prevent world instability and crisis, and also the destruction of world markets, economic markets. It's not just war.
Yeah,
but my point that I wanted to say is that the Shah of Iran was a strong ally of the United States. The Ayatollah Khomeini brought in Iran, which is not only an enemy of the United States, but is a provocative instigator of terrorism and disaster and destruction in the world, including now wanting to go nuclear and having stated that the first thing they're going to do is send nuclear bombs to Israel. This is the result of a failed policy, so we have to be very, very careful.
Well, I understand that that we're looking for stability.
Correct.
And
Correct.
I get that, but unfortunately, we sometimes sacrifice human rights and things that are going on in these countries for the stability of a country. Right. And isn't that really what's happening in Egypt at this point? We've sacrificed that because we wanted to make sure that there was a good relationship with Israel and there was stability in the Middle East.
Yes.
And their people are suffering and they have horrendous conditions there.
I totally agree with you, but here's the problem with Egypt. Egypt is not a society which has a tradition like America had in its revolution of they don't have a Jefferson, they don't have a Hamilton, they don't have a Washington. They have a confusion. And so these kinds of developments, certainly we should promote human rights, but not at the expense of destroying the whole situation and having it fall down. That's why I think Obama's point is good to say to Mubarak, you've got to make these changes. But a precipitous change that launches the Muslim Brotherhood into power is a world-class disaster. So I think right now what the president is trying to do is to promote these American values without sacrificing the peace in the world. And that's really a tough job.
It's a very fine line.
It's a very fine line, very difficult.
Let me put you on the spot. What would you do in this type of situation? How would you handle it? Would you come out today and ask Mubarak to step down immediately? What do you think is the best thing for the United States to do right now?
Well, I think the best thing is to stabilize the situation. And I think that's what they're doing, because they have Mubarak announce that he's stepping down. We've got to get the people out of the streets and fighting. That is a very ominous sign. If the pro-Mubarak forces and anti-Mubarak forces are fighting in the streets, that could blossom into a real disastrous internal revolution. The other thing is to try to find other leaders. I mean, is el-Baradei the only leader in Egypt that can possibly take, I've only heard his name. There are other distinguished Egyptian leaders that are out there. Somebody that can come in and help to transition this country into a real democracy that functions, not a democracy of the Muslim Brotherhood. That is not a democracy. They've already announced their intentions. They have, it's sort of like Lenin's thing about 2 steps backward, 1 step forward. In other words, please bring me in. I am right now nonviolent, but ultimately their intention, they've said there's going to be a war. So I think that American policy is very well intentioned. And America is the great, majestic, democratic country.
Well-intentioned.
Well, I believe in America's mission,
yes.
And it's a difficult mission to balance promoting democracy and being a really free country where anybody can say anything they want, with also preventing the entire world economy and from falling apart and initiating a really not only a regional war but potentially a world-class war where Iran now would be involved. So there are a lot of pieces of this puzzle. If we could get this transition to be a real transition and calm things down and usher Mubarak out, and remember, the United States is the bankroller here, $1.2 billion. That has to say a lot. And we didn't talk about the Army. The Army is very important.
The Army has been really taking a step back at this point.
Exactly. And that's very key. I am confident that the people in our Defense Department are in touch with the Army to figure out what the Army is going to do. Because if the situation deteriorates in the streets, the Army will come out of the barracks and maintain order. There's absolutely, I don't think any question.
Does it look like the Army could actually take over the country at this point?
This is a country of 80 million people. This is a very powerful Army. There are at best, let's say, they call it a million-man march. I don't know how many people are in the Tahrir Square, but I don't think that they can oppose. If the Army comes in, the Army can use force. The Army has taken a prudent position and has not come out of the barracks to suppress it. But if the whole situation goes bad and you have the anti and the pro forces fighting, I am confident right now on the telephone, we have our generals and our Joint Chiefs of Staff are on the phone with the Egyptian military to modulate what's happening here. They've gotten Mubarak to They see the exit door. He's on the way out. The question is, what happens in this interim period to get stability, get peace, get democracy, but not have the whole show go down and fall apart?
Listen, we don't have a lot of time. I want to take us back to domestically here. Let's talk a little bit about Rahm Emanuel. Any opinions on what's going on with the ballot and whether he should be on or shouldn't be on? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, you're a lawyer, I'm a lawyer. We defer to the courts. He lost in the lower court, he won in the higher court. It's a tricky question. Residency issues in elections, it's time-honored a way to kick people out and also to...
Remember Hillary Clinton? She was trying to get on the ballot here.
Absolutely. They used to have in the South, and I don't want to use this term, but carpetbaggers that used to come with their carpet bag. Now, Rahm Emanuel actually lived in Chicago, was brought up in Chicago, had an apartment in Chicago. True, he didn't live there. He rented it out to somebody. So he did try to figure out the ways, the bells and the whistles, what he needed to do to really remain a resident. So he went to Washington for an important job to help the president. I think he should, honestly, I wouldn't say I'm his greatest fan, but from a legal point of view, I don't think he should be penalized.
He's also very popular in Chicago.
Yeah, he's popular, and plus, he went to serve the president in a very important job. We shouldn't penalize someone for serving the country and then coming back and wanting to serve the city where he grew up and where he has his roots. So I think it's sort of a tricky question, but I think the Supreme Court in Illinois made the right decision, because you also want to have an election. But the point was that the courts can talk about this till tomorrow. Let the voters decide. If they like Rahm Emanuel, let them elect him. Let them not elect him. But don't kick him off the ballot, not give the voters the chance to have a shot at it. I think that was a fair point.
Okay, we don't have much time, but the Republican majority in Congress.
Yes.
Your thoughts, are they starting to take a step back? Are they deferring a little bit more to the
Well, they're emboldened. Today they're very emboldened, because I think yesterday, the day before, the judge in Florida declared that the Obama health care plan is unconstitutional and threw it out in its entirety. And my understanding is the House introduced the bill to repeal the Obama health care plan, and now the Senate the Republicans are trying to do the same thing. So the question is...
It looks like the judiciary seems to be weighing in on the issue as well.
Absolutely. That's going to the Supreme Court, so we'll put that aside for the moment. The question is, are the Republicans going to be so emboldened that they're going to make all sorts of very overreaching and silly step. You know, it's like the thing in Monty Python. You know, the office of silly steps, silly moves. They can make a lot of dumb moves and overreach and make themselves look stupid, or they can be very prudent and try to work with the Democrats and get something accomplished. So that's what I would hope for.
Okay, we got to wrap up quick. Rahm Emanuel, does he win or does he lose the election? What do you say?
He's a winner.
He's a winner.
Absolutely.
That's what I like to hear.
Okay.
Mark, thanks a lot.
You agree with me?
I agree with you.
Okay, perfect.